Welcome to Let's Talk Learning Technology. Do you know the latest in learning technology? Matt and Walter do. From learning authoring tools and animation to virtual reality and everything in between, innovative learning groups Matt Kurtin and Walter Schirmacher geek out on all of it. Get their perspectives on the latest trends, tips and tricks, and recommendations so your learning tech keeps up with the times.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to LT Squared. I'm Matt Kurtin, Senior Director of Technology and Visual Design at ILG.
And I'm Walter Schirmacher, a programmer at ILG. Welcome, everyone. We have a very exciting episode on tap for today, artificial intelligence.
So, Walter, let's start out by talking about what artificial intelligence is. Can you explain it in layman's terms?
I can certainly try. So artificial intelligence is a simulation of human intelligence. So basically, it's teaching a machine to do a task like a human would do it. So we teach or train an algorithm with some data, and we do it so that it can learn to look for patterns and correlations and eventually learn to make predictions about future states, which is a complicated way of saying that a program can understand context better. So like if you're asking about football, for example, and inquired about the Vikings or Lions, the AI would understand you wanted information about the football team, not the seafaring people from Scandinavia, the Vikings, or the large cat native to Africa and India, of course, the lions.
Artificial intelligence is all over the news now, and what we want to focus in on is how it's applicable to the process of designing and developing learning and performance support. I thought maybe we could start with talking about some of the tools that instructional designers might use for writing learning objectives or content or questions. I think we could also talk some about what testing we've done and what we've encountered.
I think that's a great idea, Matt, and a good place to start. I know we did some specific testing with artificial intelligence with instructional designers. Can you tell us a little bit about how that testing worked and what the results were?
Yes, we did a few different things. So one of the things we did was some research just with our programmers on our own, going out to look at what the capabilities are for doing things like writing learning objectives, summarizing content, or creating quiz questions based on content. But then we also spent some time pairing our programmers with instructional designers and going through the flow of a project so we could work together on things like creating the prompts for ChatGPT to see if we were getting the best we could out of it. With writing learning objectives based on content, what we found is that if the content was fairly generic and there was a lot of information about it on the web, it was really good at doing things like writing learning objectives. Same things for just giving it a general content area and having it create content. But when the content was more custom, it wasn't well known, or it was something you would only know about within your organization, we found that although AI would confidently give you results, the results were not very good. We took a look at how could the content be analyzed to develop questions using ChatGPT and also two other tools, Quillions and QuizGecko. And we got a variety of results there. Sometimes the questions were not very interesting, like it always got it right, but it would just give you a paragraph and leave a word blank and create a multiple choice for you to pick what word goes there. So it didn't have any way to not develop the question right, but the questions themselves didn't make great sense. With some of the other tools, we found that it was fairly creative in the way that it created the questions, but sometimes the questions that it created, like the answer that it said was the right answer, wasn't right, or some of the distractors didn't make any sense. So still some room for improvement in those types of tools.
Kind of like when you have a person who really does know about a subject versus they think they know a little bit about it, but they really don't. So
yeah, and kind of like they're programmed to give you the answer whether they know or not.
The simulation of human intelligence.
I think another thing is that you could look at it as using artificial intelligence as a partner to brainstorm with the instructional designer for things like writing learning objectives, creating quiz questions, because then what you do is you have it generate options for you, but then your instructional designer looks through all the options and rules out the ones that are not good. And that's something that we always do at Innovative Learning Group, is the responsibility to make sure it's accurate remains with the instructional designer. We never count on what comes back from AI is going to be right the first time.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's getting better. I know it can summarize. If you give it some text, it can summarize it often pretty well. Sometimes you have to adjust the summary because it finds it doesn't always understand what things are important and what things are not. But yeah, for creating, it's still learning at this point.
Yes, and I did observe that it was good at things like adjusting to the formality of the tone and adjusting the reading level to different reading levels. It was pretty solid in that, regardless of what content we were working on. It's just the accuracy of the content being paramount.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and it also depends on what kind of data it was trained on, because it really ingests all that data, and that's what it's basing its answers on, is all the data it was trained on. So if it knows about something, then yeah, it can answer more confidently. And if it really doesn't know, then it doesn't really have the context to answer correctly, because it doesn't have the information to base it on.
I do think going forward over time, there's going to be a lot of efficiency gained out of AI by improvements in and trust on using the data that's specific to your organization and excluding data from the outside. I think it's going to take a while for that to unravel to where people feel confident in the security measures to take that kind of approach. But I think that will help prove accuracy as well as better granularity of control over what data you're considering as the AI makes the decisions about what it should say.
Yeah. And I think the part of what we're running into right now are some of the limitations of hardware and just cost, because you can ingest a lot of information to an AI, but that takes up space and time to train it. And you only have so much of that. And the more data you try to train it on, the longer it takes to train it, which is the more it costs to train it. And then the more it costs to store it, because it becomes a huge program. And then it's harder to run, because the bigger the program, the more fancier hardware you need to run it. I mean, you could theoretically train it on all the information on the internet, but you couldn't run it then, because no server could run it, because it would be gigantic.
So let's move on from the instructional designer's role to the media developer's role, where we might be creating or editing audio. Walter, what has your experience been with those types of tools?
Well, I've tried a few different tools for editing audio, and I've had some good luck with the cleaning of audio. I did some work with an open source tool named Audacity, and it actually has a good plugin for doing the cleaning of the audio.
When you say the cleaning, you mean like getting out background noise or removing ums and ahs, that type of thing?
Well, mostly focused on getting out the background noise. There are other tools that will help you get out the ums and ahs. Adobe has some tools that are still beta testing for actually podcasts, but it actually works with general audio that you can also use to do cleaning of your audio. And you actually can then designate how much cleaning and getting rid of the noise you want and how natural you want it to sound, in essence. And then I know, Matt, there's other tools you've been testing that actually let you do some word-based editing. I know Adobe Premiere has this built in, but you tried another tool named Audiate.
Yeah, we discussed that one in one of our prior podcasts on tools that are used for media. That Audiate is a good tool for being able to edit by selecting the text instead of having to look at the waveform to figure out what to edit.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice technology. Whether Audiate, Premiere, or other tools do it, where it can take your audio and then turn it into text. You can remove the words from the actual word, and then it actually removes the same audio piece. So that's very handy.
What about tools for creating graphics? What have you tried?
I tried just some of the generative AI ones out there that you can then have it like fill in the background or remove an object, and some of them work really well, and sometimes you get some very interesting painting-like effects. In other cases, I worked in Photoshop directly and had it fill in some backgrounds. I had to have a hand, which was holding a card, and I had to put a new card in there, but it was a different size. So it actually filled in the missing details of the hand and did pretty well at that. It can work within limits. With all these tools, it depends on what it's been trained on.
So I've also tried some tools for creating graphics from scratch. With the paid version of ChatGPT, you get access to DALL-E. I've used that. I also tried out trial versions back when they had them, which pretty much now they're getting rid of the trial versions. But I tried trial versions of Stable Diffusion and also Midjourney as well. Midjourney, at least at the time I tried it, was a little bit harder to get started because you needed to put in your queries via Discord instead of a web interface like most of the other tools.
I've been actually trying out some of those tools at home, which we'll get to in a bit. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. When is Articulate going to be releasing its AI features for Rise?
That is a good question. So as recently as 15 days ago, no exact date was specified for when it's going to be released, but they say that they're targeting spring 2024, so it could be any day now. I've been really excited to see that not only are they talking about Articulate Rise getting AI features, which it seems like it's going to get the majority of the features, But some of the features are going to be available for Storyline as well. I would guess things like the automatic creation of talking head videos from a script. So I can't wait to see what we're going to get from Storyline as well as Rise.
Can you tell us a little bit about what they're talking about adding to Rise?
Well, from some of the preview stuff they've showed, will be a lot of the provide a prompt and it will create the content for you. One of the nice things about what I see in the features that they have is that you could easily adapt from one block type to another. So if you had a block of content that was just text, you could ask Rise to create that as a tabs interaction, for instance, and it would automatically convert for you rather than you copying and pasting to make it. The other thing that I like about it is that instead of going out to all these different tools to do the different pieces, like to get content written for you or to create graphics, you'll launch it right from the spot in Rise where the result goes into your course automatically when you've asked the AI to create it. And it seems to me that would be a huge time savings versus jumping in and out to a bunch of different tools.
I think we'll see more and more of that getting incorporated into tools and getting it customized into the tools, which I think will help eliminate some of the weird answers and weird, outputs that we see, because it'll be more incorporated and more integrated and customized so it actually works correctly with the tool.
Walter, I know that you've been setting up and testing tools to run AI on your own computer instead of using some of the online tools like ChatGPT. Can you talk a little bit about why you're doing this and what you hope to get out of it?
I'd be happy to. So I actually set up a home lab server, which is a computer I have at home that's on a network where I can run code and programs for testing development and, of course, use at home. And I'm running some AI programs on it so I can learn, of course, more about AIs, how they work, and, of course, their limitations. I can break them, of course, without it being a problem. I can see what it takes to get one up and running. You actually do need a fast computer with a good graphics card to run AI, not because the AI is making images, but because graphics cards are really good at running code very quickly. And so they've actually adapted graphics cards to run AI programs. You usually have to run them on remote computers that are really strong, and then you pay for all that time when you're running at them. But if you do it at home, your only cost is the hardware and electricity, and of course, it runs faster because you don't have that remote connection. So I've been learning all about how to customize the AI, which is like teaching it about a set of data where you can take your data and put it into a special format, and then it can actually learn about that data, and then you can ask questions about that data. So that helps eliminate some of the problems of a generalized AI that only knows about things that it's been taught. And you can actually then teach it about your data. And then you can get very specific questions and actually get more valid answers out of it. I've learned about the different kind of models, like you talked about Stable Diffusion and how it was free for a while, but now you have to pay for it. They actually have open source models that you can download and run on your own computer if you host it yourself, and then you can try it out and learn more about it. So, and of course, the fun thing is I'm learning and experimenting outside of a project. And so I can actually see how we can use these, how we can host them, customize them, and eventually bring it all back here to ILG. And so we can then apply it to getting it used for some of our future projects.
So it seems valuable that you're doing this because I feel like you're getting a deeper understanding of how the AI works behind the scenes than most people will get just from creating prompts for the popular ones that they can use online. It also sounds like, though, that this wouldn't necessarily be for the faint of heart in order to get set up. I don't know if it's more of a programming skill or an IT skill you would need to pursue it the way that you're doing it, or if it might be the type of thing that if anyone was willing to spend enough time, they could get the instructions from the internet to do what you're doing.
About a year ago, if you asked me that question, I would have said it's not for the faint of heart. The programs being used to run them are getting better and better, and people are combining them so that you actually can have good, what are called front ends, like web UIs, so that you can pretty much just load it and then pick which UI you want and then install it. You do need a little bit of knowledge for getting it to run because you have to get it, you have to get your computer set up right and have the right settings. And you still have to install a couple of libraries that take a little bit of knowledge to install. But beyond that, once you get it up and running, you can do a lot without having too much knowledge, though you may need a programming friend just to help you get started.
Interesting. Well, I've also been taking a look at how you could pair AI with programming, but I've been doing it in a different way. So instead of taking the tact of what could I run locally on my own computer, I've been looking at the Azure services for AI and taking a look at how could I write a program that at times could make use of AI for some of its processing. And it links back to the way that Rise is going about it. I feel like ultimately much more productivity will come out of authoring tools and processes if not everything is done through writing prompts for the generic AI, but instead you have a program that's meant to do a particular task, and there are particular parts of that task that you could call an application programming interface or an API for the AI services in the cloud to do some processing for you, return some results, and continue on with the flow of your program. I'm very excited to see what additional things can really get accomplished by putting that programming framework around instead of trying to ultimately do everything through writing prompts to narrow down to your result.
This reminds me of the evolution of how we got to where we are now with really good programs with like graphical interfaces to the computers. Back in the day, everything was commands where you would type in stuff and then get responses and had to do all that kind of customizing. And eventually we got to the point where we could write some more of our programs with more of a graphical approach. And then we got to now where you can pretty much do everything and just do more, only have to do a little bit of stuff behind the scenes. And we're kind of seeing that same evolution with AI, just at a quicker pace than we did way back when.
Yeah, it's a really interesting observation, Walter, that we went from a command line interface to a graphical interface and now to an interface where we can freely have discussions with the computer and use that as a way to generate our next steps. Natural evolution. Good point.
Yep. I think we're going to, because I mean, in the libraries I've been checking out have gone from that, where it was more like just Chat GPT, and now we have more web interfaces where it's like, which of these models would you like to try? And then you can just literally install them and then work with it. So it's interesting to see how it's evolving. And that's only been within the last year I've seen it change. So as more and more months roll by, we'll see more and more of this stuff get more and more available for people.
Yep. And I think the direct impact on the training industry, we're going to see happen kind of like an explosion as soon as Articulate Rise releases its artificial intelligence features. I feel like the effects are going to be dramatic.
And I know Adobe has a number of its AI tools they've been integrating into Creative Cloud, but I've heard rumors that they're working on incorporating similar functionality into their new Captivate tool that they've just released. They're getting the initial part of that out, and then I read that they're going to be putting similar things in as well for the all-new Captivate. But that's still in development. So thanks, Matt. I think we had a good discussion about AI. I think we learned a little bit about what is being done right now with instructional designers and how ILG is approaching it, what we can do with some various tools for audio and graphics, and of course, the future coming up, not just from home labbers, but also from businesses as we take and look at artificial intelligence and get it more and more honed in and more integrated with programs. Never forget the lesson, which is always that, it's a good companion, but not just something to rely on by yourself. You always have to check and validate. Trust, but validate.
Trust, but verify, right?
Trust, but verify. Thank you. Yes, we always want to trust, but verify.
Well said, Walter. Thank you. If you want to learn more about AI, we've posted a bunch of resources at the bottom of this episode's page. As always, if you have any learning technology topics you'd like us to talk about, Walter and I are on LinkedIn. You can also send us an email at marketing@innovativelg.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.